Since it's Tanya and Beer, we'll start off with Shahakal, brought to you by Stellar Twa. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech haolam, Shahakal Niyeh B'dvarei.
Amen.
All right, so we're holding chapter 1 of Tanya. So we did the title page, and we did the compilers forward. We had a Pesach break. So just to review, in the title page, the Alter Rebbe says that the whole Tanya is based on the verse in the book of Deuteronomy, because to observe the Torah is very near to you, to do it, and then he says more. Torah says to feel it, to serve Hashem with love and fear. And the question we started, which is mentioned in the title page, which is implied in the title page, is that doesn't seem to be the case with reality. That means we feel that observance is not easy. That's the question. And Alter Rebbe said he's going to, based on his teaching of his teachers, the Maggid of Mezrich, the Baal Shem Tov, and also the Maharal of Prague, the Arizal, and he's going to explain in the long, short way. The long, short way being, it's not easy, but once you get it, you get it. And it's not easy to get it, but once you get it, you can apply it. Then he had the compilers forward. The compilers forward, he said that the problem with the written word is not everybody can appreciate it. You can write the best book, but if people can't appreciate it, then I'm sure you have some books or movies that when they're made you don't appreciate it, sure. But later on they become classics, right? Mm-hmm. Right? And some things that are classics then. And I remember once I was on a plane, I was flying to Dubai. Mm-hmm. You know, when you fly to Dubai, I learned Gemara, I learned Rambam, I was learned out, and it was still 8 hours. So I said, let me watch your movies. I remember, West Side Story. I never watched West Side Story. Everyone goes crazy, West Side Story. Mm-hmm. I watched it, I'm like, this is horrible. It's trash, yeah. I'm like, what is everyone going crazy about? Mm-hmm. Right? So there are certain things that could be the greatest thing, but you don't appreciate it. You go to the Louvre and you see the Mona Lisa. I don't get it. Right? I don't get it. Right? So the Alter Rebbe says I can write the best book, the best self-help book, but if the words are locked in the book, then it has an essential problem, because the spoken word is always better than the written word. But the Alter Rebbe says I don't have time, and then people are coming with similar questions, and even people that came to me asking me the questions, they're forgetting the answers. So I have to write down the answers to all the questions, which is a very bold statement. Interesting. We just started learning Rambam, the 42nd cycle of Rambam on Sunday, and the Rambam writes, if you're learning one chapter a day, also started on Sunday. The Rambam writes, makes a statement over there. It says, I took it upon myself to write down the laws for everything. So all you have to do is learn the Torah, and they go to my book, which takes kahunis to make such a statement. I mean, you don't have to learn Gemara or anything. I mean, when he made that statement, people went ballistic.
Is that when he was in the cave? He wrote that down?
Part of it. Part of the Rambam he wrote in the cave.
So he surfaces from the cave. And
No. Someone asked him.
Yeah.
Asked him, how do you write it? He says, I don't remember the source now, but every law that I wrote had the source in front of me. So I mean, he lived for years in the cave. He was running away from fanatical Muslims, fanatical Christians. He thought the whole world was coming to an end, because everybody was crazy. And so he lived in a cave. Then later he went to Fez, and he went to Cairo. Anyway, so he says ultimately the Tanya has the answers to all the questions that you might seek, and if you can't find it, then go to someone in your community that can help you. And if you have the answers to help somebody, you have to help them. You can't feign humility. Okay, that's where we are. All right, here comes Tanya.
Sometimes.
What?
That.
Yeah.
This whole concept, it's like if you have the answers, it's your responsibility then to be the one to step up.
Right.
Not to kind of shy away and be like, someone else will help.
Right. And we see a history of Jewish leaders who didn't want to become the leader.
Yeah, sure.
Who were capable, obviously Moshe.
Yeah, right.
Noah. Well, that's why Noah. By the way,
Yonah also.
Yonah is a great example. Also, Noah, by the way, shied away. That's why he's not the first Jew.
Right.
Why is Avram the first Jew and not Noah? Because what did God really tell Noah to do? He didn't want him to build an ark. What do you really want him to do? You wanted
Save
him,
everybody,
huh?
To save everybody, no?
By how? By
Tell them
by
what's
teaching them,
going
by
on.
convincing them, by talking to them. Noah said, "Oh, that's not my. I can't do that. That's who am I to? I'll just hide myself in a box."
Yeah.
God says, "Yeah, no, that's not what I want. That's not what I need you for. That's why Avram is the first Jew, because Avram, God didn't appoint him. He did it anyway. He took it upon himself.
Right.
He felt the purpose that
Right.
if I have something to share to help somebody, I'm going to. That's why Hashem said, "Oh, this is a guy. He's going to be my main man." That's why if you look in the Torah, nowhere in the Torah does the Torah go crazy with love like Avram. Hashem talks about Avram. I love him, and he's the best thing. And it's almost like a guy talking about his little kid.
Yeah.
There's Avram and there's Moshe. Also, Moshe, Hashem goes, when they speak bad about Moshe, Hashem says, "How dare you? How dare you speak about my Moshe that way? Bechol basing them on my whole house, he's believed. How did you not tremble before speaking about Moshe, right? But Moshe, for example, they don't want to become a leader.
Right.
You see, Moshe says straight out, I don't want to be the leader.
Yeah.
Who am I? I can't. Power's not going to listen to me." That's Hashem says.
Yeah.
You think it's you? It's me. You're just, like so people ask the Rebbe, how can I build a Chabad house, build a mikveh, how can I have it impact the community? The Rebbe says, "You think it's you?" He says, "I'm going with you."
Right.
Those are powerful words. When the Rebbe sent Rabbi Groner, not the Rebbe's secretary, but his older brother, to Melbourne, he sent him in 1956. When in 1956, he already had a family. I think he already had 6 kids. I think so. Or 4 kids, whatever. So he had a family. And sending from him from Brooklyn to Melbourne in 1956 was a life sentence. These days, you don't fly to Melbourne. You know what it was to fly? The first time he flew to Melbourne,
Super intense.
it took a 2-day flight.
Right.
Had to stop, fill gas. He flew the first time, I think, in 1949. You think it took him like 2 days? But so, and they didn't want to go. I mean, the Rebbe's source of inspiration and being cut off, being sent to the other side of the world. The Rebbe told him his strong words. You should. It's very nice to listen to. You ever heard his CD, Rabbi Groner Speaks? Toward the end of his life, when he was sick, I don't know who, his grandchildren, the people in the community went and interviewed him. He was there when the previous Rebbe came to America in 1940. He was there when the Rebbe came in 1941. He was there for all this.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of stories like at that time. He has some great stories. Great, and he was also a public speaker. He would go around the world speaking. The Rebbe told him, said, "I'm going with you wherever you go." I mean, very, very strong words, uplift him. But that's what it is. I mean, if you have the right answers, it's not you. It's not you're the genius. It's the Torah. Hashem just put you in the right place and to say the right thing. It's not. It's one of the biggest problems that the people think that when they accomplish something, it's all me. We see in Parshas Hazinu. I know we're getting off the subject here. It's going to happen a lot, by the way.
It's better like that.
Yeah, in Parshas Hazinu, Hashem talks about the Torah talks about how the Jewish people are going to sin and they're going to deserve destruction, and Hashem is going to send the nations of the world to punish them. And the Torah says, if it were not for the Gentiles taking credit for themselves, instead of giving me credit, I would have let you guys be destroyed. The only problem is that the Gentiles, what do? They attribute it to their deity, not to God. That's the so. But the point is, when you're somewhere, it's the right place at the right time to do or say the right thing, and you can't hold back. You know the famous story. You've heard the story, I know, because I've said it a couple times. The famous story of the Rebbe's wife in the car. You familiar with that story? We're going to start here. I might start chapter 1 next week. Really, I feel bad for you, Nani. You're not supposed to be here, but he can't be here, so I'm really delaying. It's a delay tactic. But anyway, so as much as the Rebbe was public, his wife was private. The Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin, didn't walk around Crown Heights. No one even knew her name. Right. She was just Mr. Schneerson. No one knew, except for a handful of people. No one even knew the sound of her voice, because she would call up the store, make an order. It was anyway. So for ear and for relax, there was the driver who take her to outside the neighborhood. She would walk around, and the board would walk, or she would, whatever. She would just, so every time she would go, they would take the exact same route, every single time. One time they went, there was construction, and the driver had to take side streets. Remember the story? Yeah. So they're driving down the side street, and they see a whole commotion. There's police, there's all this screaming. So they drive past it, and Rebbetzin says, turn back. I want to know what's going on. So Rebbetzin says, you do it, right? The guy says, the guy gets there, the guy gets out of the car, the driver gets out of the car, comes back and tells the Rebbetzin that apparently this family is in the hole, can't make the rent, and they're being evicted. So Rebbetzin said, well, go find out how much they owe. And so when the guy came back, he found out the amount. Rebbetzin wrote out a check, gave it to the guy. So on the way, when they continued on the way, the Rebbetzin said, you're probably wondering why I did that. Because she explained that my father, the previous Rebbe, taught me that whenever we experience something, it's our job. We're put there to make it better, to improve. So obviously, the fact that I witnessed this, it's because I have the ability to improve it. So therefore I did it. So that's, everyone's a shliach, everyone's an emissary of God. Everyone. It's not just the Rebbe, not just the rabbi, not just the people went to yeshiva. Everyone has the ability to do the right thing, to make the world a little bit better. Sometimes it's teaching, sometimes it's helping someone physically. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. Enough delay. Sorry, none. Tanya. Exactly. Tanya. We learned in the brisa. So there's a brisa. So there's different types of mishnaic notes. So there's a Mishnah. Mishnah was compiled by Yehuda Anosi, of notes passed down to him by other rabbis during the Second Temple. Then there's that's the most comprehensive, not comprehensive, but that's the most concise and edited. Then there's other notes that weren't included, very similar to the Mishnah, but not as authoritative halachically. That's called the Brisa. The Brisa was compiled, authored by Rabbi Yeshaya. And then there's the Tosefta. Tosefta is similar to Mishnaic notes from the rabbis called Tanya, that was compiled by Rabbi Chia. So Tanya, when you see in the Gemara, it says Tanya, it means it was quoted in a Brisa. Tanya was quoted, it was learned in a Brisa. In the tractate of Nida, in the end of Seif Parag Gimel, in the end of Parag Nida. Nida is the tractate that deals with when and what makes a woman impure. When a woman, according to the Torah, we actually had it in last week's parsha. When a woman menstruates, she's impure. She has to count. She has to finish her period. Then she has to count 7 clean days. Actually, the 7 clean days is rabbinical. It's not even rabbinical. It's something the woman accepted upon themselves on their own. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's a stringency that the woman accepted upon themselves on their own, that they count 7 clean days, and then they go to the mikveh. Right. So.
What was that instilled? When did they come up with that?
It says the woman accepted upon themselves also that no matter what small sign of blood, they count 7 clean days.
What generation was that? Like what era?
I don't remember.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So the so in that tractate, like the Gemara, like we go off, on tangents. The Gemara also goes off on tangents. So it says over there, it talks about, because it's talking about the man and woman being intimate in conception. So it gets into all the conversation about what happens in the spiritual realms.
They got on the best tangents.
Yeah. About so it says Mashpina say. That means before a soul is sent down, the angel. There's a whole long Gemara over there. The Gemara it says it bring the soul, and the angels come before God. It says, is this soul going to be this? Is this soul going to be that? And before the soul goes down, they demand of it. So one of the things over there it says is a whole long talk about it. It says in page 30, the second side. It says Mashpina say we make the soul swear. I was actually talking to my kids on Shabbos about this. A soul is alive. You are your soul. You're not your body. You're your soul. We're just so used to our consciousness, but that's not really who we are. Because when you're asleep, for example, you're still alive. But your consciousness is not. When a person passes away, it's their consciousness that's that's past, but their soul, their identity is still there. So he said we administer an oath to the neshama. It says, what do we say? Tehi tzaddik. We tell the soul you have to be a tzaddik, and I'm not going to translate the word tzaddik, although it says be righteous, but v'al tehi rasha, don't be wicked. And then we continue. We, the angels. So it's something called Bezdin Shemayla. Bezdin Shemayla is the heavenly court. And we continue, we tell the soul, and even if everybody in society tells you you're righteous, don't believe them. Hey beinecha kirasha. Should be in your eyes like a rasha. Now the word, everything in Hebrew is multi-dimensional. A lot of words are very similar. And certain words based on how you, the nekudot, the vowels you put in them, that's how you read in them. So the letters shin, vei, zayin. Well, shin and sin, by the way, have the same letters. Yeah. Just one's dots on the right. It's really the same letter. It's like a nekuda. It's like a vowel. It's really what it is. Taf and saf, same letters, right? So shin, vei, zayin is sheva. Sin, vei, zayin is sava, to be satiated. So sheva, shavua, it's all the same. So not only, it explains in Kabbalah that not only do we make him swear. What's the point of an oath, by the way? Why do you swear? The famous story, Yaakov tells Yosef, bury me in Israel. Yosef says, I'll bury you in Israel. Swear. What do you mean? If you believe him, believe him. If you don't believe him, then what's the... Hey, we're just talking about how you miss it. See, I was delaying, I was telling stories.
It's true. So just maybe he'll be here.
Did you win?
The rain won. Hashem won.
It's outdoors.
See?
Outdoors. All right.
Look at that.
There. So
God knew where you needed to be.
exactly.
That's
So
what I was thinking. I keep texting them. Are the courts closed? Are the courts closed?
So what's the point of an oath? Saying if you
hold you accountable for something. If you're just saying it, it's like you could always just kind of like find a way
yeah,
out.
but then because the idea of an oath is that there's something else greater than you. It's supposed to.
It's like you're sealing it.
It's supposed to fill you up with responsibility. Yeah. It gives you more. You're enabling the person to keep to the word. So when it says that we make the soul swear to be righteous, not to be wicked, it's because we're trying to shavua is oath, sovea is satiated, filled, like we have it in the Torah. V'achalta, v'savata, you eat and you say and you satiated. And you make a blessing. The idea of satiated when you filled up. So we're charging the soul. So we're telling it to be righteous and don't be wicked. And even if everyone tells you you're righteous, don't believe them. So now the Rebbe says, we have to understand. The Hatnan says in the Mishnah, Tanya is a brisa, right? Remember I told you the most authoritative Mishnaic text. Different rabbis have different titles, right? So you have the Zakanim, the elders. Then you have the rabbis of the Tanakh. They're called Nevi'im. Then you have the elders. Then you have the Anshe Knesset. I'm sure you've all right. The men of the Great Assembly. Then afterward they're called the Zugot. The Zugots are the pairs, Hillel, Shammai, right? Then afterwards they're called the Tanoim. The Tanoim are the rabbis. Their job was to to extrapolate law from the text.
Those were Rabbi Akiva's.
Yeah, that group. It's a group of like 400 years.
Yeah.
Right. So the last of the rabbis was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So he compiled the notes passed down to him of all the rabbis of his previous generation, and he compiled the Mishnah. The other notes, they're called Brisa and Tosefta, but the most authoritative is Mishnah. But the Gemara usually is trying to balance the three different texts, trying to make sense, because some are missing, some have more information, and it's trying to come to one conclusion. That's where the whole back and forth is. One rabbi says this. So we have a brisa that says, brisa is authored to Rabbi Shia that says, consider yourself wicked. And then a Mishnah in Perek Beis, which we just learned on Shabbos this week. We read Pirkei Avot every Shabbos. The Shabbos in between Pesach and Shavuot, 6 chapters, 6 weeks. Chabad custom is we read it all the way through the summer until Rosh Hashanah. But the world custom is we read it between Pesach and Shavuos. So the second chapter we just read this past week is V'halti Rasha b'fnei atzmacha. You shouldn't consider yourself wicked. So Which one is it? We're saying, in the Gemara says that we tell the soul that even if everyone tells you you're righteous, consider yourself wicked. And here we have a Mishnah that says, don't consider yourself wicked. So the first question is a textual question. It's a contradiction. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to come and ask a logical question. He says, if you consider yourself wicked, if you're always a loser, no matter what you do, you're never good enough, then what happens? You give up. What I'm doing is not. I was listening to a class. What's the biggest difference between Jewish theology on humanity and Christian theology on humanity? Christian theology believes that man is born in sin. So no matter what you do, you'll never make it. We believe you're born in holiness, and it's because of your actions you decide if you should become corrupt, or become or to elevate even more. It's a whole different. You wake up in the morning, you wake up and you clean slate, and you can do something. So you believe you have potential. But if you believe you're a loser no matter what, it's like Stockholm syndrome or some syndrome where you believe you're a loser. I'm sure there's something, or someone always keeps you down or something. I don't know. So then you won't even bother. You won't even bother. It says Yera Levavai, you'll be grieved. Yera 8:7, you'll be depressed. And you won't serve Hashem with joyous of heart. You say, okay, fine, big deal. I won't serve Hashem with joy. So I'll serve Hashem without joy. The problem is, if you look in the book of Devarim, in Parshas Kisaveh, where you have that, the whole parsha is one massive leo, 96 consequences. It's called the Teichacha, the rebuke. And at the end of all the rebuke and all the terror and really bad things, Moshe says, and you want to know why all these bad things are happening to you? Because you didn't serve Hashem with joy. Not you didn't serve Hashem. You're religious Jews. You didn't serve Hashem with joy. So it's a problem. It's not just enough to be observant. You got to be observant with enjoyment and enthusiasm. So, but if you feel like no matter what you do, you're going to be wicked, then where's the enthusiasm? And now, so one problem is, so if you care, you become depressed. And if you don't care, that's also a problem. So if I go, if I go to you and say, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, and I say, meet you there, that's a problem. It should bother you. In the old days, I heard this from an historian once. She said, in the old days, you told someone to go to hell. That was a very serious thing. Because they believed heaven and hell were very, very, very real places. Yeah, because life every day was hell. So they believed in heaven. He pointed out that you look at the art, medieval art, and the statues and all that, they're terrifying. You go to a museum in Europe and look at the art, it's horrifying what they believed in, the gargoyles and everything else. These people, to them, life was hell. So these days, no, we don't care about that. But if you don't believe there's consequences to your actions, it doesn't bother you, that's also a problem. It says again, I can't quote the page because I have a different layout. Now, if you're not bothered at all, then if it doesn't perturb him, then he's going to become irreverent. Such an attitude, if you're not a good person, it should bother you that you're not a good person, right? If January 1st you're happy with your figure, that's a problem, right? January 1st, I gotta go to the gym. At least the idea should occur to you. If you say, no, I'm good. Right.
It occurs to me on February 1st and March 1st. April 1st.
Right.
You're consistent.
Exactly. Just take them to mirrors and you're fine, right? So Alter Rebbe has these questions. By the way, some of these questions are not going to be answered for a very long time. So remember, it's a long, short way. If you want quick answers, Tanya is not the book for you. You need to go through it. Because Alter Rebbe is going to do is, you'll see, starting chapter 1, he's going to say everything you understand, throw it all out. We're going to start from the beginning. Beginning. What makes up a person? So if you don't even know who you are, then how could you expect how to estimate yourself, how to judge yourself? So it's going to take time. So I'm just letting you know. So if you have no patience, if you want this like a 60-second YouTube clip, short, this is not There's not. Ach Inyan. So it's like this. Kihini Metzina b'Gemara in Brachas. We find the Gemara in Brachas chapter 7. Actually, the Alter Rebbe says it's in two places in Brachas. One's in page 7. One's in page I think 62, where the Gemara talks about 5 different types of people. There's a Rasha, that's a tzaddik b'tovloi, a tzaddik and a righteous man who prospers, and a tzaddik rarely, a righteous man who suffers. Basically it's explained over there. What does it mean? He prospers. He both spiritually and materially. There's some righteous people that do well, very, very well spiritually, but materially they suffer. It's actually a story in the Gemara over here. I think it was Rabbi Yechanan was sick. He was very sick, and his friends came to visit him, and he said, "Don't you know that Hashem rebukes, and Hashem, to those who loves, he wants to purge them in this world, so this way you can have better olam habas." I think it was Rabbi Yechanan said. No, it wasn't Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan was the one who went to visit someone. The guy said, the other rabbi said, "I'd rather have less olam haba because the suffering was too great." Rabbi Yechanan said, "Take my hand," and he cured him. But yeah, but that's the idea. Some tzaddikim that have it hard. Some tzaddikim that don't have it hard. Then you have Rasha v'Tayolai. Then you have the Rishayim that prosper. They sin, and it was very good for them. Rasha v'Ralai, and they have the wicked man who suffers spiritually and materially. Then you have the Beinoni. And if you notice in your Tanya, even in English, there is no translation for the word Beinoni, because the whole book is called the Book of the Beinoni. So, Alter Rebbe is not going to give it a translation because it's not a translation. It's an idea. It's an understanding of what a person is. Pirush Gemara, and the Gemara explains. So before we get to Beinoni, let me just tell you, by the way, Beinoni is not explained till chapter 12. So again, if you want to know what it is, you gotta wait. First, Alter Rebbe is going to explain Tzaddik and Rasha, and then he's going to get the Beinoni. And then after he explains what a Beinoni is, then he starts explaining what's expected of you. So it says in the Gemara that Tzaddik v'Tovloi is a Tzaddik Gomer. A righteous man who prospers is a complete Tzaddik. What does it mean? He has a complete Tzaddik. We're going to learn that he has no evil. He's completely righteous. And a Tzaddik v'Raloi is Tzaddik she'eino Gomer. So therefore, he experiences some measure of material suffering. Why? Because there is some element of shmutz. You know what shmutz means? Shmutz is like dirt. It's like a little bit. He has a little bit of a little mark of. You have to think of it like in those. I think in the computer rooms or the space rooms, you can't have any dust. So those places, they're very, very intolerant to pollutants. So a tzaddik, because he's so much, on the pure side, they're very, very intolerant to pollutants, which is anything attached to materialism. But a tzaddik doesn't mean he doesn't exist in the material world. He's here. He's just not attached.
So he's here in the material world. He's not attached to it, and he has no evils, meaning no Yetzer Hara at all.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah. But answer your question is yeah. No, he has no Yetzer Hara. Zero. But that's what we're going to learn. So when we call, when a woman calls her kid, "Oh, yeah, my tzaddikel." No.
Low battery.
Okay, just press okay. It'll continue with the recording till. So in Tzaddik she'eino Gomer, why is he incomplete? Because there's some mark, some attachment. It could be he's not conscious of it. Some mark of attachment to the physical world. Okay, we'll get more now. Now, Rai Behemna. Rai Behemna is a book of Kabbalah. Rai Behemna is different books, different parts of Kabbalah were written by different people. So you have the book of Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is the book of formation. It's the book of Kabbalah. It's either authored by Adam Arishan, the first man, or Avram Avinu. The Kabbalah wasn't authored necessarily by one person. A lot of it was written down by Shimon Bar Yochai, which we celebrate his Yahrzeit on Lag BaOmer. But he wrote down stuff. It was passed down to him. He didn't author it. He didn't compose it. So Rai Behemna, it's called, Rai Behemna means, it's Aramaic for the faithful shepherd. Who's the faithful shepherd? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe teacher. So he wrote a book of Kabbalah on the book of Shemais. So the book of Kabbalah, on the book of Exodus, was authored by Moshe Rabbeinu. So it says in Rai Mehemna, Pashas Mishpatim, Pirush it explains. So it says Zohar. I mean, it's in the Zohar, but what does it mean? Tzaddik Ra'aloi. What?
Just on Shemos?
No, this book, the part of Kabbalah that's on Shemos is called Rai Mehemna.
No, I'm saying, but that you said was written by Moshe. It was only on
I think so.
Shemos.
I think so.
It was not any.
I think maybe I'm mistaken. I think so.
Mm.
I think. So, for example, in Medrash, by the way, you have a Sefri, Mechilta.
Yeah.
Those are authored by different
Sure.
different rabbis as well. Not authored, compiled.
Compiled,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. So it says, what does it mean? So, Sharasha by Kafel V'Teif. What does it mean? The Ra. So it says, now let's read it like this: Tzaddik, a tzaddik, V'Ra loy, and the evil is to him. What does that mean? That the Ra is Kafuf. Kafuf means it's subservient. So the evil is there, but it's insignificant. So you can't compare somebody where the evil is non-existent to someone who's there. Just because it's not subservient, it doesn't mean it's not there. Now, I don't know if it's a good example, but maybe someone will correct me in the future, or maybe now. There's a story in the Gemara of a Kohen Gadol. His name was Yechanan Kohen Gadol. He was from the Chashmonai family. Just to give a little historical background. After the story of Hanukkah, who beat the Yevanim, the Greeks, was the Chashmonai. Now in the Torah was the first one to introduce balance of power. Kingdom was supposed to be from the tribe of Yehuda. Priesthood was from the tribe of Levi, from the family of Aaron. What happened was, after the story of Hanukkah, the victory of Hanukkah, the Jewish people were in such shambles. It was because it wasn't, like we had the story of Hanukkah, everything was peace and love. No, it wasn't. A lot of Jews went to the Greeks, to the Hellenists. It was a very, very bad time for the Jewish people. So Shimon, the last remaining son of the 5 sons of Matasyahu Kohen Gadol, decided for the health of the government he was going to be king and Kohen Gadol. The rabbis didn't like it, but because it was such not imbalance, but it was such a precarious situation, they let it happen. So the problem is, many times the father is good. The problem is the kids. So Shimon was a good guy. The problem is his kids weren't good. So I think this was his grandson. His name was Yechanan Kohen Gadol. Now to be Kohen Gadol, it means you had to walk into the Holy of Holies. Now if a Kohen Gadol wasn't on par, that means he would suffer the consequence during the year, or sometime in the first temple he would die on the spot. Second temple he might have died later in the year. He had to be a righteous person, and he did it for many, many years. And then, at the end of his life, he became an apikaris. Apikaris means he denied the rabbinical. He became a tzedukah. You were a tzedukah, a Sadducee.
Yes,
You familiar with the Sadducees? So it's in. This is based on Perkei Avos chapter 1, where Yeshua ben Prachya says you have to be very clear in your teaching. To Nasan Arbeli, this is Mishnah. Just reading it. Hey or Vav. It says you have to be very clear. Why? Because they had these students whose name was Tzaddik and Baisus, I think so. And basically said you have to serve Hashem not because of the reward. Forget about the reward. Your job is to serve God. And they took it as there is no reward. So if there's no reward, and why bother? And they said basically everything the rabbi said was nonsense, and they created a very, very successful movement, which basically the rabbis don't know what they're talking about, and it's all about power. And they gave this establishment, the Pharisees, the Purushim, they gave them a lot of trouble, and it's a whole reason you could thank these guys. The fact that there's 2 days of Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot, it's because of these guys. Because they messed up, they convoluted the whole Rosh Chodesh system. They would light fires on top of the mountain. I think I told this about it. Wow.
To mess with them, right?
Yeah. So in the old days, when the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem would declare Rosh Chodesh, they would light a fire on the mountain, and one mountain to the other mountain, word would travel from Jerusalem to Iraq in hours, a day. So they knew right away when Rosh Chodesh was. But in order to undermine the rabbinical authority, they would light the fire at different times. So the rabbis would have to send people on horseback. They created a lot of problems. So there was a big problem in the Second Temple times, the second half of Tzedukah, and these guys weren't idiots. You know, these guys weren't people like today who grew up not religious and orthodoxy is too intense for them, so they like to reform. No, these guys were educated people. A lot of them were priests, by the way. They were the elite of society. The biggest problem was he came to the temple. It wasn't like these guys lived, in Caesarea by themselves. You came to New York, for example. You walked into Borough Park, and a lot of the rabbis were they didn't believe in. There's a story. This Yechanan, by the way, this Yechanan Kohen Gadol, he became a tzedukah, but he kind of paraded himself still as religious. On the outside, they looked the same.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mitzvah, there's a rabbinical mitzvah which is referenced in the Torah, but a very slight reference. But it's basically a rabbinical mitzvah. It's called Simchas Beis Hashreva. On intermediate days of Sukkot, they would go to the Shiloh spring, the Shiloach spring. They would draw water, and then they would dance the whole night, and then they would pour the water on the mizbeach. There's a very slight reference in the Torah, because there's one word, there's three words with an extra mem yud mem, which spells mayim, but these tzedukah didn't believe in it. So this guy got up in the Beis HaMikdash, and who's in the Beis HaMikdash? Religious people, Perushim, we'd call it, Pharisees, and the mizbeach was very tall. Like the whole concept of having a bima comes from there. It was very, very tall. It was a massive platform because people were bringing animal sacrifices. It was in front of everybody. He went and poured the water on his feet. There was a hole there. You're supposed to pour the water there. There's a hole for wine and a hole for water. And it would go down into like the abyss, into the mountain. And he, in front of everybody, this Yechanan guy poured the water on his feet. The only problem is he did it in front of a crowd of thousands of people. You got to know your crowd, right? Right. If you're a black guy and you're making black jokes in front of a white supremacist, you got to know your crowd. So what did they do? They all got angry, and each guy was every single man was holding a lulav and an esrog.
Yeah.
So imagine getting pelted by thousands and thousands. He almost died. And he gave the order to kill people they killed. And that day they killed thousands of people in the temple courtyard. So what happened over here? Here was a guy who everyone thought was 100% righteous. He went into the Holy of Holies. He was a priest and everything else. The problem is he didn't even know it himself. He had a little bit of a mark of evil inside of him. For many years it was subservient. It's kind of like a dormant gene. Sometimes it could wake up. You don't even, I'll tell you something, my father-in-law, we know this. My son Usher has cross-eyed. What happened? Because something with the muscles, lazy. So you have to wear glasses. My father-in-law, just a couple months ago, he's getting terrible headaches. So he goes to the doctor. The doctor says, "How long have you been cross-eyed?" What are you talking about? I haven't been my whole life. He's 67, 8 years old. So what are you talking about? So what are you talking about? Your muscle is weak. That's why you obviously had it your whole life. No, just the gene is there. Just woke up. Just for whatever reason, something triggered the gene to wake up, and now he has a problem with his eye. Probably ever. It's fixable. So a tzaddik or aloi is a tzaddik, but he has this evil inside of him that if he's not very, very careful, it could ignite. See, the tzaddik that's 100% pure will never be tempted by something because it's foreign to him. It's like you drinking bleach. It's not a choice. It's totally.
But he completely doesn't have the challenges that we have in our lives.
No,
basically.
100%. No, to him, his service of Hashem is totally different. His challenge is finding enthusiasm. His challenge is serving Hashem, not because he wants to. If you do something because you enjoy it, it's not service. Service means you do it because you're instructed to do so. So I'm going to explain later in Tanya that part of what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to serve Hashem because we're instructed to do so. It's called lishma, to do a mitzvah, he commanded to do so. So, again, it's an advanced level. Halavai, we should all take pleasure and enthusiasm in doing a mitzvah. But ultimately, when you're serving Hashem, it's not because of something you gain, even out of something you're doing it for Him. So that's Tzaddik's challenge. Like the famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch. Someone came to him once and said, I have no desire to learn Torah. Tzemach Tzedek says, I have a similar problem. I do. So for me, you have no desire, but when you actually get up and you do it, you're doing it for all the right reasons. Me, I learned Torah for all the wrong reasons. That's thinking I wish I had that challenge, but yeah, it's. With the Gemara, safe paragraph the brachas in Gemara, in the end of the 9th chapter in brachas, it says, what's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is yetzer tov sheitim. A tzaddik is a person. By the way, a tzaddik is a physical, material person. It's not a angelic person. He's not a person born of, like in ancient times. That belief is carried into today in a certain religion. They believe that a person is so special, it must be that he was born of some supernatural event. Otherwise, how could he be so special? The Torah goes out of its way to say that Moshe was the greatest human being of all time. He had a father, and very, very weird. In the 2nd chapter of Exodus, it says a man went and married a woman, and they got married, they conceived their child. Like, okay, fine, thank you. But why does it say that? Because I think Nachmanides points out, maybe some commentaries before. It's because in ancient times they would believe someone as great as Moshe obviously must have a supernatural. No, father, mother, regular, eats, drinks, showers, everything. The only thing is, the only voice inside of his head is the Yetzer Tov. He only has a good inclination. Rishayim, it's a Hereshiftim. So we all have different voices. We all have different voices. So just like according to Jewish law, a bet din has to be a panel of at least 3. So by a tzaddik, it's a unanimous decision. All three judges say do this. By a Rasha, it's a unanimous decision. All 3 judges, so to speak. Well, it's really two judges, because the evil inclination, there's a good inclination, and then there's you. You are the third person in the panel. So by tzaddik, all 3 in favor of good. By the Rasha, all 3 in favor of bad. By the Beinoni, we have the Yetzer Hara telling him to do bad. It's a Tov telling him to do good, and then there's you.
And your wife.
Well, your wife tells you what to do, right? So now the Gemara says, now you want to know what a Beinoni looks like. It says that this is in brachas. So Amar Rabba, not to be confused with Rava. You learn in the Gemara, there's two people with very similar names, Rabba and Rava. Rabba ends up with a hey. Rava ends up with an aleph. Rabba was their uncle. So you ever heard of Abaya and Rava? So Abaya over here is saying that's his uncle. So Abaya's father and mother died young, and Rabba adopted him. Abaya actually wasn't really his name. His real name was Nachmani. But Rabba's father's name was Nachmani. And he didn't want to be disrespectful to his father. So instead of calling his nephew Nachmani, which was his father's name, he called him Abaya, which stands for Itchab Amru B'cha Yerucham Yasem. It says about you, a mourner will be, an orphan will be comforted. Or it comes with Abaya, like Abba, like my father. Anyway, so Rabba said, I'm a Beinoni. He's telling his class, you want to know what a Beinoni looks like? I'm a Beinoni. So Abaya said, what's a Beinoni? A Beinoni means a regular guy. So Abaya says, you're a regular guy? If you're a regular guy, then what are we? If you're a Beinoni, what's the level below that? Rishayim. And a Rasha is considered like he's dead. There are multiple places Rasha is dead. Is considered like dead. Why? What does a Rasha do? A Rasha does acts that are temporary in nature, that are here today, gone tomorrow. Isn't that the definition of death? Jerry Seinfeld has his new shtick. Well, everything in the world is just in a process of garbage. We build a house to fill it with garbage. So you have things that are nice now, but they're going to be garbage. And then when they start breaking down, what do? You put them in the closet. And then you put them in the garage. But basically everything is in a state of garbage. That's basically his shtick, right?
Yeah.
Right? But that's what it is. I think Shlomo Melech says, you're born, you start the process of dying. Everything's temporary in nature. So So Abaye says, if you're a Beinoni, what are we? We're Rishayim, which means we're attached to death. He says, you're making impossible. You're making impossible to live. And so we'll stop over here because Alder was going to say a bunch of questions. So obviously, what we understand about a tzaddik and a Rasha and a Beinoni is wrong. And next week we're going to learn. Alder is going to give you definitions, not what society says it is. What's called Shema Mushal. Shema Mushal is a borrowed term. Like for example, when we say a kosher animal, it's not a definitive term. It's a borrowed term because it is a pure animal and an impure animal. Behemat Torah and Behemat Tmeah. Kosher means fit to eat. An animal's not fit to eat. You have to slaughter it, you have to salt it, all these different things, right? So we call it a kosher animal. A pig is not. It's not. So when many times we use tzaddik in Russia and all that, those are borrowed terms. And Alter Rebbe says we're going to learn exactly what it really means and what a Beinoni is not. Because obviously Rabbah wasn't a Beinoni. Because we're going to learn actually next week that Rabbah was one of a handful of people that when the Malach HaMavos came to take his soul, couldn't take his soul because he didn't stop learning Torah. Now obviously that's not a regular person. So for give you another example, of someone who was like that, David Melech. Okay, King David, the angel of death couldn't take his soul. So if Rabbah's on par with King David, he's not a regular person. So something's going on over here that we don't understand. So next week we'll come back and we'll break it down. What does it mean to be a Beinoni, or what a Beinoni is not? And then when we understand what a Beinoni is not, then we'll start with what a person is. The physical part, and then we'll get into the material part, the spiritual part, and how the spiritual part expresses itself. And then once you understand there's also a material impulse. So we're going to learn to call it something called the Nefesh HaBahamis, the natural animal soul, and Nefesh HaLakis, the godly soul. And each one finds expression. And the real problem is, to give you a preview, the real problem is they're both trying to find expression. That's the problem. And you can only watch one channel. Do they still have those TVs where you have picture in picture? I remember when I was a kid, they used to advertise where you can watch. Do they still have that? Or split screen or something?
Streaming services still have that, but no, the actual TVs they don't. For some reason, they took it out.
Took it out. Because ultimately you can't actually watch. They've done studies. All these people think they can multitask. They've done studies. It's actually impossible. Even women, by the way, whoever's watching, even women can't multitask. It's impossible. A person can only do one thing. It's either you're expressing your godly self or your material self. It's one or the other. You can't be doing both.
Does it seem like either drawing from the Hashem and the godly side of things, or the unpure?
Right. So in other words, either you're being productive or you're being indulgent. You can't. You could fool yourself.
Right.
But either you're being productive or you're not. There's no middle ground. That's sort of, not so depressing, but challenging, because the Alter Rebbe cuts away all the BS.
Yeah.
And he draws a line in the sand. Either you are, or you're not. That's it.
A Beinoni.
Yeah. No, everybody.
No.
Everybody. Either you're being productive, or you're not. I mean, so in the first class, I said, one of the messages I always take away from Tanya is, got to be honest with yourself. I mean, if a person's going to fool themselves and close the book right now, and but the Tanya is don't fool yourself.
Right.
Either you is or you ain't. Questions, comments, feedback, keep it to yourself. I'm kidding. Thanks.